given out to come and be with us today. I've always thought February and March, at least in the academic sphere, are the most frantic time of the year. And the fact that we've got busy academics and people with jobs, responsibilities, obligations, willing to come for this morning of debate and conversation, really, it's a pleasure and a responsibility. And I hope that you'll be stimulated by what you hear. And if you heard an echo in our subtitle of the workshop of that song, What's Love Got to Do with It? You're correct. And in one sense, we sort of hear, normally law brings what we sometimes call the Eeyore effect to people involved in sustainability and social change, and what some people call the sharing economy, which overlaps with some of what we're interested in. But we're here in a way to sort of re-energize your interest and positive sense of what law can do and regulation seen through the lens of law can do to help these kinds of enterprises and initiatives flourish. So I'll say a little bit about sort of setting the scene in a minute, but first just a few practicalities. I do want to just begin today at the University of New South Wales, where I'm currently based on a research fellowship that's funding this research from the Australian Research Council. And it's apparently quite significantly difficult to get the Australian Research Council to fund research that's offshore. You have to justify that it's in the national interest. So the fact that they've funded a whole slice of Bristol-based research where I actually conceived this project, I appreciate. And the University of Bristol has been equally supportive, and they in particular have brought Janelle Orsi out here, who will speak to you later today, as a Benjamin Meeker Fellow, and the Institute of Advanced Studies and Cabot Institute of Bristol have both funded that. And there's also a productive margins research project, which has helped us set up today. More academic will be talking to you later, representing that. So many people have brought us together today. If you need the toilets, the women's are just out the door on the right immediately. The men's are round, on the same level, but round the back of the stairs. And there's also a water fountain there where you can fill up the water jugs if you run out. And I think that's all the practical issues. That tea coffee will still be there at the morning tea. And I'll just run through the shape of the day for you now. Yeah, you've got this all on your a copy of this too. But we're going to start by presenting the initial findings from the Bristol-based case studies of our international research project, which was originally called Between Social Movement and Social Enterprise, and I'll say a little bit more about that sense of a space in between in a second. As I say, it was funded by the Australian Research Council, and the project explores legal and regulatory support structures for different types of green social enterprise, is one way of sort of putting it simply, and across key sectors in transport, energy, food, and reuse, recycling. And in both countries, we've looked at instances of car sharing, co-working, community energy projects, community-supported agriculture projects, and reuse, recycle initiatives. And so we brought you here today together, and in the room we have a really interesting mix of social enterprises, people who support initiatives such as these without actually running them directly, lawyers and academics. And we're not aiming here today to deliver a final interpretation. It's actually a 4-year project. We're about 2 and a bit years in. So this is an interim bulletin in a way. It's initial findings that we want to workshop today to seek the reaction of those involved in the research and others like them, as well as interested observers, to see what comes out as most important, what directions might emerge to take things forward. And we're delighted to welcome, as I mentioned, a Benjamin Meeker Visiting Fellow as part of the response to our findings in the second session of today. Is Janelle Orsi. She's a co-founder of the Sustainable Economies Law Center in the USA. And through that center, she provides legal advice to support the flourishing of resilient communities and has played a key role in the passing of various pieces of US legislation on alternative currencies, neighborhood food, and cooperative housing. So Janelle's going to respond to our report, and then we'll open it up to the floor for open discussion, and beginning with a particular comment by Professor Morag McDermott, who is involved with a large research project that aims to co-produce, working very closely with community organizations, new forms of engagement in decision-making in politics and policy. Then we're going to have tea, and we'll have 2 half-hour sessions which are a bit more interactive and discursive, and end with a final sort of Q&A session. We've got a panel, half lawyers, half, I don't know if I activists or people that come from outside of law that get less involved into the legal technical detail of making projects like this work. And we'll have them responding to a series of questions that I'll put to them to wrap up the morning. We're then going to have lunch, and you can all chat. And we warmly encourage anyone who has the time and interest to stay from 2 to 3. We're going to sit down and produce a policy briefing for the most salient points of the merge from today. And we would welcome your participation. And lunch, the report, we were decided not to physically distribute today, but we'll send you all a link to the website and put that up after the Caroline's going to present the main features to you now, but we'll actually send you the text via a website link after that. So that's the shape of the day, and I wanted to sort of set up the Caroline's presentation of and Declan's presentation of the report, and I should also briefly mention that these two, Caroline and Declan, who will present to you in a minute, are the two main research associates on the project, Caroline based in Bristol and Declan based in Australia. So Declan will give you a little bit of a flavour of some of the comparative trends that we see from Australia. But I just wanted to put this spectrum of activism and enterprise up on to give you a sense of where the project's motivations originated. Because a lot of the findings you'll hear today are quite concrete, detail-oriented, and arise from the everyday operational workings of the projects that we've studied. But the title of the grant, being Between Social Movement and Social Enterprise, was very much trying to capture the sense that people creating these projects were actively setting out to do things differently, to reinvent business, if you like. And of course it's true that social enterprise as a general concept has been around for some time. Debates on the sharing economy are newer, but many people responding to those debates are constantly pointing out that people and groups have been sharing in various ways, not unlike what's happening in the sharing economy for centuries. It's just a little bit more technology enabled, and it acquires a certain pizzazz as a result of that now. But I think there is a clear sense in which we see people motivated by ideas of deeper structural change in setting up these projects. And the biographies often show a kind of a move out of activism into a sense of enterprise. You'll get people coming, refugees, if you like, disillusioned civil servants, sometimes people who might be younger, more idealists from the beginning. But they are people we find through our interviews that want to demonstrate positive alternatives to ecologically and socially harmful business as usual, and to do so in a way that is more than just corporate social responsibility, if you like, to weave social and ecological values into the heart of exchange, and rather than sort of bolting them on as a protective afterthought once you've set up a viable business. And they're working them into the structure of that initiative, project, or business as they go. And I say initiative, project, or business quite consciously, because I think sometimes the line between it being a business and a social project, which is not necessarily able to be called a business, is always blurry. And there's quite a striking feature in these motivations too, that we found that although the environmental context was the project, was the sense of where the project came from, it drove our selection of case studies. What we often find in the way that things work out practices is the quality of social relationships that are reframed through doing things differently that is most prominent for those involved in it. And at least to date, although people are starting to put pressure on this, there hasn't been as much overt organisation of the entire project structure around demonstration of environmental sustainability and carbon reductions, which is interesting, I think. And as I say, I want to keep that context in our minds as part of that activism, as a motivation and a sense of systemic structural change, as an aspiration for these kinds of businesses is here today, and we'll move to a much more sort of nuts and bolts, if you like, practical project focus for much of the report. But I attended a day-long transition network event just last week, and one of the coordinators of that is on our final panel today, and was struck by how different, that was quite self-consciously a day of reflection of what it is to be a movement, to come together to collectively and to collaborate around that sense of deep structural change, and how to keep it functional and effective that works around those initiatives. Practical projects are very much part of transition initiatives, but they won't that day. So I sort of see these days as complementary, and I think there are interesting ways in which you can ask questions about what are the collective cumulative effects of many projects like this, which operate admittedly at a small scale, but I think in the way that they do seek to reframe this change earlier could really have a cumulative effect that I think the transition network itself has just produced a report saying the new economy in 20 enterprises. So this sense that all these initiatives together add up to more than what they are individually is part of the two sessions really that we'll be doing in a more interactive way after tea, working towards imagining coalitions and networks around these issues and what they could do. So just to finish with a mention about the magazine that I offered everybody a copy of, 2 issues, back issues. It's not an academic publication. It's a mix of theory, activism, practical projects. Its subtitle online is Community Co-ops. Community doesn't have the subtitle on it, which is interesting. But it's edited by somebody in Bridport who's one of these creative, innovative, perhaps you could call him a millennial idealist. He's not here. I haven't bounced that description off him. But I think it's a terrific publication, and he and I are co-editing a special issue of that on law and activism, which will be out just 2 weeks' time. I was hoping it would be out with this. But I thought it was a lovely space to have the kind of dialogue we hope to have today, which is about big ideas, but also focused on quite practical issues that people deal with in their everyday operational life outside of the ivory towers, and I think those borders are starting to crumble more and more these days, and hope that we'll enjoy our collaborative crumbling as we proceed today. So that's it for the introduction, and now I'll turn to Caroline, who, as I say, is